So we have our agenda there. Well, first of all, welcome to those that have joined us from our CCOs and any members of the public. I don't need to go through health and safety. You should know where your exits are, but welcome nonetheless. And councillors, just in terms of meeting etiquette today, if you wish to ask a question or you wish to comment on something, please do that through the chat box as we've tested in previous meetings. So I'll go through the order of business, our agendas. So we apologies for this meeting. I haven't received any apologies. So we'll move on to number 2, which is notification of additional items. Again, I haven't received any additional items. And number 3 being declarations of interest. If there are any, again, I haven't received any declarations of interest. So we'll move through to number 4, which is the confirmation of the minutes. And I would like to move part 1 and part 2, please. And I'll do that unless there are if anybody does not want to do that. So if you don't want to do that, please just let us know through the chat box. But I'll look to move that, and I'll ask for a seconder if the Deputy Mayor would second this.
I will second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So we have the confirmation of the minutes there, that we resolve that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 25th of March 2020 part 1 public be confirmed as true and correct record, subject to amendment to clause 28.2, replacing 101 with 142 and 101A with 142A, and that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 25th of March 2020 part 2 be confirmed as a true and correct record. That is moved by myself and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up for any comments, and there is one, and I'll pass to you, Deputy Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Tangi Tikiri, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any problem with confirming the minutes as indicated on the screen. However, I do want to just make a very brief comment in reference to clause 27-20, which relates to the suspension of committee and council business through committees. What I'm proposing after this resolution is passed, which I assume it will be, is to give notice of an additional recommendation or notice of motion that effectively will allow the Committee of Council to continue its business from next week, really. So just flagging that if this passes, then I'll have a supplementary or an additional notice of motion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and maybe if you just get that prepared, if you haven't already, for the Administrator, and we'll deal with that once we've dealt with this resolution. So there were no other comments, and look, for the purposes of this, which should be relatively straightforward, I'll just do it with all those in favour, if they could please say yes. But when we get into other votes that may be somewhat more different, we'll do that by asking each individual member to state whether they're for or against. So we'll do it with all those in favour. Yes.
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 Aye. Thank you. And that is passed unanimously. Is there any against? Thank you. That's passed unanimously. I will now move to your notice of you had another resolution there, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor Tangi Tikiri. There it is on the screen. So I'd like to move that in light of the move to Alert Level 3, the Council confirms that the Committee of Council Committee will continue to meet on 8, 11, 20 and 21 May next if required. Essentially, this is to allow the Committee of Council to undertake its business along with the annual budget process. The words "if required" are there because I understand that depending on how deliberations go, The 8th and 11th are set down for hearings, and the 20th and 21st are set for deliberations. So if both of those days are not required, then it just allows flexibility in the Committee of Council, or the Chair in that case, Mr Mayor, effectively not proceeding with the 21st. So this, in my view, is the cleanest way. I've worked with governance on this as well to ensure that what currently is in train is permitted to occur.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I'm quite happy to second that for you. I'll open it up if there are any comments. It is relatively straightforward, and thank you for bringing it to the attention. It's a bit of process, but it's an important bit of process, so thank you. There are no comments or questions of this. So again, I will put this to the joint vote. So all those in favour? Yes.
Aye.
Any against? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Right. We'll now move to reports, and number 5 on our agenda, which is the Cultural CCO's 6 monthly reports to December 2019. On page 25 of your papers, councillors, you will have a memo there from Rebecca Hoffman, but I think we have Julie McDonald or Cheryl Bryant, the GM, just to speak to this. Are there anything you want to add to this, Cheryl or Julie?
I'll leave it
Kia
to
ora
Julie.
koutou. Kia ora koutou, Julie McDonald here. No, there's nothing further to add. The report can be taken as read, and the representatives from the CCOs are all present to answer questions if you need them, as is Matt Duxfield, the accountant, and Becca. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Julie. So it's on pages 25 through to 20, page 30. We have the financials there. I'll open it up for any questions of Julie, and also our CCO guests as well. So we've obviously got the Globe here, we've got Te Manawa, we have Acacia Birch, and we have the Regent Theatre. So are there any questions? And we do. And we have Councillor Bowen. Councillor Bowen?
Yes, Rachel here, just getting myself unmuted. Yeah, thank you for coming along, everybody, and for the opportunity to ask questions today. I had a couple of questions. Well, I have a couple for the Globe to start with, if somebody is online from the Globe who can answer.
Hi, Rachel, Jerry here.
Hello, Jerry. Lovely to hear from you. In your report, you talked about hosting the performance of Up, Down, Girl. And
yes,
I don't know what's going on the screen there. And I noted that council provided some funding for that. That was unusual for the Globe, and it was a fully accessible performance. I wondered if you could tell us more about that.
Okay, well, I believe the funding was actually given to Up Down Girl themselves, not the Globe Theatre.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not too sure. But yeah, obviously, it kind of, this does fall out of that 6-month report, because Up Down Girl was, I think, was in February and March of 2020. But yeah, obviously it was a fully accessible performance, which meant it was aimed very much at everybody. So they had a signing interpreter. They had a person doing, they met with any people with any disabilities. They met with them beforehand to take them through. Blind people or people who didn't have good sight, they were able to meet with the cast members and get to understand their voices and things like that. So when the cast were in the performance, they knew who was talking. So that was all organised, obviously, by Nathan Mudge and his team. And it was just, yeah, it was fantastic to have it here in the Globe.
So, Jerry, is that the kind of thing that you might be able to do in the future? Is that something you'd be looking at?
Oh, totally. I mean, like the Globe we always wanted to be accessible to everybody and anybody. You know, there's no reason why any show cannot go ahead. So when the Up Down Girl, and we've had a history with Nathan, because I know Nathan has worked here in the past, and he's here every Saturday morning with his George Jazz group that use our rehearsal room. So, you know, when he came to, well, he would have come to Denise probably over a year ago, I would have thought, because I only came on in October last year. And Denise worked with Nathan over the time to, you know, to get what they needed. And of course, then I came on board, and we worked with them. There was a huge, you know, the booking process was quite meticulous in the sense that every time somebody booked, the plan was to find out if they needed any help, if they needed any assistance. And then prior to the show taking place, we actually made contact with everybody as well, just double checking that they didn't need any, if they needed any help, we were able to provide that for them, or at least Nathan was able to provide that for them.
Well, I was there. It was fabulous. I think it's a fabulous example of a true community theatre. So thank you for that. I'll leave my questions there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, hey, thank you.
All right. Look, councillors, the CCO's here to answer questions rather than present, but we have a number of more questions here. So, Councillor Johnson, you have a question for Te Manawa.
Kia ora koutou, Councillor Lorna Johnson. Yes, so on page 59 of our paper, there's quite a lot of detail about staff development and staff training, and it's really good to see. And I just wondered if either the CEO or the board chair would like to expand on that and just tell us what benefits they see coming from that.
Andy, I'll leave that to you.
Is Andy there? Andy Lowe?
Andy's showing in the call, Mr. Mayor. He's just unmuting himself.
Right.
Sorry about that. Morena koutou. Great to see you all this morning, and thanks, John, for this passing this on. Yeah, it's been fantastic to have. We have a wonderful person from in our learning team called Jamie Court, who is qualified in service IQ training, and she actually studied at UCOL and had all of this training through UCOL done. So she's been the person who's been driving this in our team, and we've had quite a few people gone through the system, and including things like museum studies as well. So we're seeing some great benefits in terms of people learning new things, but also bringing new things to this kind of environment.
Thank you. I'll pass back to you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Councillor Finlay, you have a question for the Regent.
Yeah, it's just one I keep an eye on. With your total liabilities of $163,000, how much of that is actually holiday pay, please? Someone tell me.
David. David, just unmute yourself.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Are you talking to the Regent already?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
So
what's the question? Sorry.
So question, sorry, Lou. Councillor Finlay, would you like to just repeat your question?
Yeah, thanks. Of your total liabilities of $163,000, could you tell me how much of that is owing as holiday pay, please?
Certainly, that's your annual question, and well asked. Look, I don't know the exact figure. I believe it's something like. Is Charles here? Have we got? We have.
Yes,
well, Charles
yes.
will be.
Yes.
Charles will be able to answer that. Exactly.
To be exact, Lou, I cannot tell you, but roughly 20,000.
Just 20,000. So it's dropped since the last time we spoke to you.
Oh yes, I'm working diligently on getting out of the venue, Lou.
I'm pleased to hear that, Charles.
And there's
Thank you.
considerable pressure from the board for me to do so.
Right. Thank you.
Right, councillors. Now, Councillor Barrett, you have a question for the Globe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councillor Barrett here. Just wanted to understand a little bit about how the surveys of the patrons at the Globe are going. My understanding from reading the report was that customer satisfaction was being monitored for people that came through the Globe ticketing system, and I wasn't able to ascertain from the report what portion of your overall patronage base that actually represented, and if you had a view about perhaps broadening that out to ensure that you're getting a comprehensive look at the Globe Theatre patron satisfaction.
Hi, Brent. I don't have those figures directly in front of me right now, but what we do, we're still kind of trying to come up with I won't call it a better system, because obviously at the moment we are using our patron base database, and when people come to our shows, we send out questionnaires, etc. And of course, you're very reliant on people actually taking the bother to answer those surveys. So I can send out, if someone comes to Roger Fox and there's 150 people, and I send out, out to 100, we might only get 5 or 6 response. We might get 20. We are currently looking at a kind of trying to come up with a better way of doing this, trying to guarantee that we get a better response from people. We don't want to stop people inside the theatre and make them all put their hands up and say, yes, we had a great time, yes, we loved it, yes, we'll come back. But we do realise that we have to find a better way of getting a response from people. So we're currently looking at different ways of doing that. We haven't got anything set up at the moment, but we have been using the last 4 weeks to play around with some ideas. Do we reward people when they answer a survey? Do we give them a discount? Obviously, do we give out draws, that kind of thing? So we're just, we don't really have those figures as yet, mate. Sorry.
Thank you for that. I suppose the follow-up then would just be to understand from your perspective, because you are inside the organization there, how comfortable you are that the satisfaction numbers that you're getting through those surveys are representative of your broader audience.
Well, for me personally, having been here now for the past probably 4 or 5 months, I know when people walk out of the shows that you can get the feel whether they've been happy with the show. If people have something that they're not happy with, I know they haven't been short in coming up to me and saying, wasn't happy with this, didn't like this, my seat wasn't comfortable, blah blah blah. I do get the feeling that people are quite happy with our shows. We are getting the same people coming back to our shows again. I've been here the 5 months and I'm recognizing so many people that keep coming back again and again and again. Our numbers are quite good, as we would expect for a lot of our shows. So that gives me the confidence that at least we're putting on what people want to see. They are coming back to see us. Our Summer Sounds Festival was a really good example. We had those 11 shows, and I think we hit about maybe 15 to 20 people who actually bought into buy more than 3 tickets to a show and save some money, So there were people who were really engaging with that festival.
Great, thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Rutherford, you have a question for Te Manawa.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, was that me?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Rutherford, thank you. I've got a couple of questions for Te Manawa. Kia ora, Andy and John, thank you for making yourself available to us today. So under your performance measures, I'm looking at page 60 of the council agenda, or page 55 of your report. I'm just wondering if you could provide a little bit more detail around the visitor numbers to Te Manawa experiences and the exhibition numbers across New Zealand. So the status for both of those is at risk, and I just haven't quite understood from the comments as to why, or I wondered whether that's just forecasting with the current COVID situation, but could you provide a bit more detail on that, please?
Andy might have the detail in front of him. I'm sorry, I haven't got that worksheet open, but I think there are two aspects to it. One is general numbers are at risk, obviously, for the second half of this year. And the second part of that is that at present, the only touring exhibition that we have live, as it were, is the Top Twins. So that number is quite low. I think we're still doing some work on our budget for the remainder of this year and into next year, as well as the exhibition programs. So I know we have a workshop with councillors on the 6th of next month. We'll have some better detail on those numbers before then for you.
Thank you.
Andy, have you got any other comment on that, perhaps? It seems not.
He's not on mute.
Come in, Andy. Are you there?
Yes, I do. Sorry, I was off on mute again. Just that a couple of venues have pulled out of Top Twins over the last few months to do with COVID. So that was one of the things we looked at as well.
Okay. Thank you. The in terms of the online space and I guess online exhibitions or just online engagement, is that now counted separate to visitor numbers, or is that included? I guess recognising that that's probably a space that there'd be a bit more work in at present.
That's counted separately, as you can see, but that is something that we're working hard on. And in fact, one of the teams has done some pretty amazing work on already in terms of the learning space, online learning opportunities in terms of the Curiosity Club that's been happening. So that's been a big push for us and will be in the future too. Yeah.
Thank you. And then just my final question was, under your now I have to find it. Under the comments around staff development, there was just a comment about all appropriate staff have had annual performance reviews. I was just wondering what appropriate meant in this situation. Was that permanent or?
Good question. Yes, that is definitely permanent staff. Yeah.
Okay.
As opposed to fixed term. Yep.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen, you have a question for Te Manawa.
Yes, please. Just a couple of questions for Te Manawa. Kia ora, John. Kia ora, Andy. Lovely to see you this morning. Following up on the questions that Councillor Rutherford mentioned about exhibitions, you said the Top Twins is the only exhibition that's been touring. So I'm just wondering what happened to Sunlight and Farewell Zealandia, and there may be others, but what about the Te Manawa product that we have historically had out there touring? What's the situation with that?
Well, I can answer that at the moment, Rachel. A lot of them are in development in terms of maintenance. They need a lot of maintenance. Some of them have been touring for numbers of years. And so we're planning to do some work on those for refreshing in terms of concept as well. But also things like Sunlight have really exhausted their venues at the moment because they're quite big shows and they need large venues to take them. So they've kind of been to all the big venues in New Zealand at the moment. So that's sitting there and it'll probably go out again because it tends to sit for a while and then be requested again by venues. So that one's a good one for us to hang on to and people really love it too.
So in terms of those exhibitions, when they finish that first rotation, which is what I'm hearing from you, do you do the kind of cost analysis at that point of how much that exhibition costs to design and develop and how much it's brought back in terms of touring fees?
Yes, we do. Yep.
And so did Sunlight make money?
I can't answer that exactly. I can't exactly answer how much it made, but it did make some money. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Andy. And the other thing I just wanted to follow up was the comment in your report about working towards dementia-friendly status. I know that's something we've all been really interested to see Te Manawa breaking new ground there with that one. Any further comments or explanation on that one?
I know, but I think it's a great opportunity. It's the first museum we understand in New Zealand to have this, and it's such a fantastic link into, you know, a demographic that we often struggle with in a way because of mobility and access, and people being able to get to places. So, you know, it really started off with some amazing work that Prue was doing, getting into rest homes and actually going out there. And since then, you know, with this full-on intense training that that Alzheimer's New Zealand has been doing with all staff, including myself, everybody has come to, you know, has got some great new skills and understanding, you know, of people with dementia and those kinds of, you know, brain issues. So it's been, yeah, it's been fantastic.
And when do you expect to finish working towards it? When will you be dementia friendly? Is that at the moment?
I don't know the detail, actually. It's another whole process that we have to go through, and it has been intense up to this stage. But we'll just have to find out what the next steps are, and I think Prue's probably the best one for that, to let us know the next steps in terms of what we have to do to do the final part.
So work in progress. Okay, thank you, Andy, John. Thanks, Te Manawa. That's it for Te Manawa from me, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Harpiter, Keisha, you have a question for Keisha Birch.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Nikki and Grant, for being here today. This is just regarding combined marketing for Keisha Birch. I just wondered if we could just ask a question around that for you and how you've been working on marketing for Keisha Birch for the venue with the City Council and with other venues, and how that's been going. Thank you.
Good morning, Grant O'Donnell here. I'm going to pass that over to Nikki.
Good morning. I'm down in the bottom corner there. So we've not really, I guess we're quite different in our operation, and we've said this before with respect to the other three venues. I have been working quite a bit with CEDA lately. We're really sort of trying to tackle, or we were trying to tackle, the international tourism. We're obviously going to remodel that through to local tourism more so, and for the next 12 months. Essentially, we keep in contact, attend the CCO's meetings, but in terms of marketing, we tend to do a lot more online, direct marketing, certainly in terms of the conferences. And then, unfortunately, we've had the rug pulled on our two major events for this year, which is obviously in the second 6 months. But we've got quite a lot planned for the next financial year. So no, there's still some work to do on that marketing front, and I think we seriously have to sort of row our own boat, as well as keep that contact with council. You know, we do constantly ask, or I do certainly at the CCO's meetings, you know, how can we be more included, if you like, in the whole council advertising package. So there's obviously a bit of a blip in the whole process at the moment.
So you're not having any issues, Nikki?
I don't. I wouldn't say issues. That might be a strong word, but I certainly think that you know, I've long asked for the council CCOs to be marketed by council as a group, if you like, whether it be for, you know, not just for its shows, but just as the fact that they are council supported venues, and you know, to promote that to our ratepayers, because we have such a transitory population. You know, in the whole of the Manawatu, really, that people coming in and out really don't necessarily keep up with what you own, or you know, actually what their ratepayers' money are contributing towards. And so that marketing, I feel, would it would not only assist, maybe bring people in, but it may assist people like Jerry and myself who struggle to get feedback from people who do come through. And maybe if ratepayers knew that they were contributing, not so much the Globe, but certainly Acacia Birch contributing towards it, we might actually get more feedback. So there's sort of a bigger picture really behind all of that.
Okay, thanks for that, Nikki.
Thanks, Leonie.
Councillor Johnson, you have a question for Te Manawa.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's just a question about the surplus and the situation going forward, looking at the next 6 months. So I don't know if who wants to take that, but anyway, I'll go ahead with it, which is that at the moment I see on page 71 that there's a healthy surplus of about 140,000, but mostly, according to the note, that is due to unfilled staff positions. And I just wonder if it's possible, looking forward to the end of the financial year, to make any comment about what the financial position is anticipated to be at the end of the year, given that obviously the museum has been closed for a period of time, and we don't know how much longer it will be closed for. And I think, I know these reports are for the last 6 months, but I think we need to be taking an eye to the next 6 really.
John, would you or Andy like to answer that, please?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. If I could just comment, and yeah, thank you, Councillor Johnson, for your question. In the last 2 days, in fact, over the weekend, Catherine's been burning the midnight oil on our budgets, both for the remainder of this year and because of this extraordinary year we're having this year, obviously for the following 2. As I mentioned, we've got a workshop early next month with councillors to go through our statement of expectation and intent. So what we're looking at the moment, and these are provisional figures, so please don't sort of hang us on them too much. For the forecast for the 1920 year, which is the current year, currently we're looking at a surplus of 122. Now that's obviously subject to anything extraordinary that happens in the year up until June, but that's a reasonably conservative forecast at this stage. Then moving out to the 21, 22 and 23 years, the 21 year we're looking at a very small surplus of 10,000, then 23 and 24. So obviously what's happening at the moment is trimming things back quite a lot, but we've had to look at shifting things from this year into next year, and then of course that flows on into the following year. So those are the figures we're looking at the moment. We're managing to avoid going into a deficit, but that's obviously taking quite a lot of hard work.
No, I appreciate that, and thanks for giving us those kind of predictions, even though I know it's very hard to predict in this environment, but I appreciate that, and it's heartening to know that you're still thinking that you'll be in the black, so that's good. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen, you have a question for Acacia Birch and the region. We'll do the Acacia Birch one first. Okay, yeah, just a quick question for Acacia Birch. Thank you. If Nikki or Grant is there, it's Councillor Bowen here. I just noted on page, I think it's 7 of your report. Goodness only, it's sideways on my screen, so I'm having trouble. You talked about 2 external event organisers and a shared risk model that you're looking at. And I know that's something that we talked about at the end of last year, I think. So I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about what your thinking is there in this shared risk space.
Basically, with the shared risk, it's simply that we provide the venue and the promoter who would, I hope, have all the artistic connections, but, you know, put on the show, and we would receive or have an agreed amount that we would receive that would cover the cost of the venue based on ticket sales, etc. So, you know, it sort of fills a dual purpose and for our KPIs, and that we're bringing lots of people, and we recognise that there may be people who come to Acacia Birch who may never have attended anything else there. So it's a good marketing exercise for us, if you like, but hopefully an income generating exercise as well. And also we have, I have through certain we deal a lot with the Manawatu Principals Association, and so I quite often chat with them and say, well, look, you know, if your school has a particular fundraising thing that it wants to do, then, you know, come and talk to us. We would actually look at helping them with the venue, again, under that same sort of, you know, concept for us. They provide all the labour and the activity. We simply should be able to get away with opening the gates and again bring a whole section of the community that may not have actually utilised the venue. So that's the idea. So we've actually got our we've got our own, you know, our bridal fairs generally at least break even or money making. Most years it's been money making. The 125th we've now moved to the 1st of November, fingers crossed. That's a free event that we're putting on, and we've received, fortunately, some funding for the entertainment part of that from Pub Charity, and they've been kind enough to let us hold it over. And then next year, I'm hopeful we have a partner to run one or two musical events on the lawn. So hopefully things will pick up for us in this coming financial year. Quite excited about it, and we'd like to be able to do that every year. You know, it's just pulling it all together. So
that's great to hear those plans going forward, Nikki. But can I just maybe wasn't clear. How is the risk shared if people are just paying the cost of the venue through ticket sales?
Well, we obviously have to staff it. We have to make sure that the grounds are looking nice. We present the venue as it needs to be. So therefore there's a cost for us to be able to do that. We usually need to have at least a couple of staff on site. It's not just here's the key, open it up. So there are costs, and obviously the power costs, the toilet paper, the whole 9 yards. So there is a cost associated to Acacia Birch Trust Board. The risk is that they actually get ticket sales. So for all the work, and obviously we usually help out with marketing, whether it's through our social media. So obviously all those costs are borne by us until such times as there are ticket sales.
So they don't pay you until they've sold the tickets. That's
that's correct.
Okay, thank you for that. That helped explain that for me. I think that's an interesting start to that discussion. I look forward to seeing more of it. My second question was for the Regent on Broadway, Mr. Mayor, if you want me to continue.
Yes.
So, Charles, if you're there, or David, it was a question about, you have a KPI about bringing national and international events to the city. So thank goodness we're looking back at the last 6 months of last year and not this year, because there's not much international work going on. But I was just interested in how you responded to that KPI, where you talked about, obviously our local large musical came into that, but then you talked about national and international touring events. Or national and international events was the Stan Walker tour and the jukebox tour. And I just wondered, is that the right definition when they're tours that go around every venue, or the large venues around the country? Is that what we mean by national and international events, is something that goes everywhere? Or are we looking for something that's more unique to Palmerston North? And if anybody would like to comment on that.
I'll pick that one up, David. Charles speaking. Yes, this is the constant job I have of contacting promoters and remaining in touch, which was the way we achieved the Catherine Tate tour.
Yes.
Now, there are some events that probably will not come to Palmerston North, and you do have to sort of encourage that. They can be sometimes main centre events, that's Wellington, Auckland, Christchurch, But Palmerston North has a significant base and it's strategically placed. So it's about convincing those promoters that Palmerston North is a viable venue or a viable region. Yeah, so you could include that into the KPI. But yes, you are correct that we are on the touring circuit and there are some events that will be coming to Palmerston North regardless. But how we sort of qualify that, yeah, that's a tricky one.
Thank you, Charles. Yeah, I think that does, it probably reinforces for me that KPI is probably not quite right from my perspective. I think what I'd like to be seeing is, I think what you've just described as, getting into that main centre touring programme rather than the general national touring programme. Maybe that's something we can have a look at in statement of intent discussions, just to give greater specificity around what kind of touring events we see as adding the most value, and which is not to undersell the huge value we get from being on the national, the general national touring programme. But I think Catherine Tate showed that we can join those maiden centre tours and do a really good job, and I think there is potential for us there in the future. But thank you for the work you've done in getting the tours that you have got so far. Thank you. That's it from me, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barrett, do you have a question for Acacia Birch?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Barrett here, and was hoping to hear from Grant O'Donnell on the references in your report on page 10. You say that the board is planning to enhance its business operations model, and I just wanted to understand sort of the scope of that effort and time frame around that effort.
We've been looking at we have a rather peculiar setup at the moment, which we've looked at over on a number of occasions. We've been a little bit stymied by the fact that we've lost a couple of board members recently who were looking at that. One of the things that we've been a little bit concerned about is the fact that we have a catering business run by an employee. And so we were looking to see whether, in fact, we should be modifying that. We were also looking throughout across the board to try and see whether there were other mechanisms that we could put in place to deal with catering externally, and a variety of different ways in which we could deal with catering options. Nikki's probably the best person to talk about that, because she's looked at a number of options there, and none of them are easy because of the peculiarities involved with having the use of the kitchen and the way we have people looking for a whole variety of different levels of provision of services for catering. That's really the business model that we've been talking about. Of course, we have a whole range of other activities which our new SOI is going to be looking at in terms of expansion of other activities, but there are limits within, and this is the tension, of course, we have throughout, trying to maintain the heritage status and at the same time cover costs, maybe even make a small surplus. At the moment, we're effectively covering costs, and I think if we can expand our activities, which aren't necessarily business activities, then we'll be doing our job in terms of satisfying the community and satisfying the ratepayers and council. But Nikki might want to expand on that.
Hi. I would say, well, certainly this COVID is going to slow everything down a year, but I've had some pretty good discussions with the girls at Cedar, and really what I see as a way forward for the property is utilising the asset, if you like, more for the visitor industry, tourism, local, local interests, and running the house alongside as a revenue generating mechanism, still hosting the conferences and the functions. Unfortunately, many of you that know the history, it was received in total disrepair. So we weren't in Ulverston. We weren't left with a whole lot of furniture to display, etc. So the events are a means to an end. But I feel now that the property is in a position, and Palmerston North's growing, and it has so many new people coming into the area, that we can really take charge, if you like, of a more tourism-based, visitor industry-based business. Whether or not that, certainly it won't in the short term, but whether or not that will produce enough revenue to justify the amount of work that it entails, well, I think we just have to give it a go, put a stake in the ground and say, hey, let's try this for the next 2 or 3 years and reassess it in 4 or 5 years. I can't see how it shouldn't. It's not like Palmerston North has a lot of historic homesteads that are publicly accessible, most of the time. So in terms of the catering, as the employee who fell into the position of owning a catering catering business rather 26 years ago, certainly not by choice, I can tell you, it was largely there to support the I guess the corporates, because most of them don't want to organise their own catering, and the fact that there were not many catering businesses in Palmerston North at the time that could be bothered delivering lunch for 10 people or 5 people, and so that's how it actually came about. We've always had a revolving door, open door policy. I have a lot of weddings that come and they organise their own catering, and whether we like it or not, and then every caterer in Palmerston North, I would say, has probably been there once, twice, or several times. We have a few regulars, and I often make the recommendations based on how often we see people there, because that usually tells you that they're good. And whilst that's great, that's very much a community hall sort of aspiration, if you like, being something to everybody. It's not necessarily the best way for revenue generation. So what we will look at going forward is potentially securing other caterers, or having preferred caterers who all actually pay something to the board to be able to provide their service, which is actually what my business currently does. The board get an income from it. It's not huge, but that's the way it is. So I see that there is room for growth in that area. And it's really, it's going to be far more labour intensive ultimately, but, we'll get there. And it's not going to happen in 12 months, certainly not now. It wouldn't have anyway. It's going to take a couple of years to develop this. But, fingers crossed. And ultimately, I'd like to see us end up with a permanent cafe type scenario set up there for the day visitors to keep everyone happy in the neighbourhood, but certainly as part of this whole tourism venture. So I think the big picture is very bright. It's just going to take some time getting there, and hopefully in the next year or two. Thank you.
Thank you both for that. So what I can take from that in terms of scope then is that it certainly includes a look at the catering, and is also going to be looking at ways to tap the tourism market. The other part of the question was just around time frame, and while I understand that it may take a couple of years for things to come to fruition, my question is more around the time frame of when decisions were going to be made pertinent to the business operations model, and whether there is a specific time frame that you're aiming at to look at a new approach.
Well, that's certainly going to depend to some extent on the acceptability of our proposed SOI. But if that meets approval, then I would anticipate that we would be starting to achieve some of that, say in the second and third years of our 3-year plan. Would that be correct, Nikki?
In terms of the changes we make at how we operate, I certainly think, and you're talking about the catering. Look, had we not had COVID, I would say that would be happening this year. I think the landscape's changed. I don't know who's still out there, who's viable. There's certainly been fewer catering opportunities available out there. So, in terms of the businesses that are available and prepared to come in there, let alone prepared to pay the board anything. So, yeah, it's something I want to work on, absolutely. And I would say, if we can get something in place within this financial year, brilliant, but unlikely, more likely to be sort of November, December, because at the moment everybody's just scrambling to survive. I would say, we should end in the black at the end of this financial year. We've basically cut everything, cut the cloth to suit. I'm fairly positive that, there's a lot of things that we've got to keep us busy there. There's some physical projects and things like that to the end of this financial year in June. I am holding bookings going forward. It's just they're very few, and time will tell on how that'll work. We are going to forecast a loss going into, or not loss, sorry, a reduced revenue going into the next year, because you've got to be reasonably optimistic but realistic. So, yeah, I'd like to say within this 12 months, to December, I'd like to say that, we'll see some changes.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Grant. Is there anything else here, Councillor Barrett?
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Dingwell, you have a question for officers. So, Julie McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dingwall here. So I've been enjoying hearing about Keisha Birch working with council around marketing things to kind of cut down expenses and get the word out. My other question is really around whether council is including CCOs in things like energy efficiency, because when I look at the statements, the Globe spends 16,400 odd on light, heating and power. Keisha Birch spends around 10,000 on electricity and gas. I'm not sure what the Regent and Te Manawa spend on their energy costs, but I imagine it'd be fairly huge. Is the CCOs covered, or is there a piece of work at the moment in progress that's looking at energy efficiencies for the CCOs that would cut down these expenses and help to support them in that way?
Thank you, Councillor. That's probably a question that we would need to get some information back to you, unless anybody from infrastructure is able to add that, because it's probably more of a property question. In terms of the monitoring, as far as I'm aware, the energy efficiency information is included in what's reported to you, but I probably need to get back to you with some more details of that.
Okay, well, should we take that offline? It's a good question, Councillor, and is not a silly idea by any means in terms of packaging them up. We do it for other venues, and it'd just be, I suppose, all the trust boards understanding that there would be some savings for them. So can I ask Julie that you take that offline and maybe get back that piece of work to the councillor, but all of us as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, councillors, that's exhausted the questions. Thank you to our CCOs as well. We have a recommendation there which I'd like to get put up. Thank you. But look, just before we go to this, it's although these reports have been for the last 6 months, it's actually, I think, as Councillor Johnson said, it's the next 6 months that need the real attention. And they are going to be challenging. We know that. I've contacted all of the CCOs, several times over the last few weeks, and I have been really impressed with the resilience, because your entities, your venues have been shut basically for longer than perhaps most businesses will be. And adapting to things and doing things differently, as some would say, the new norm has been grasped really, really well. You all have some form of recovery plan, and you're not running to us for funding. So I've personally been impressed, and I know the officers have as well. I do think, though, councillors, we do need to be flexible with the SOIs. These CCOs, these venues, are going to have to be incredibly agile in the next 6 months or so as they recover. So I do think it's almost like running two columns, one for the survival mode of the organisation and the other for where we want to transition them in terms of the SOI in the future. But look, everybody's well placed. I do think that we are lucky that we have such a diverse array of cultural CCOs, from community theatre to heritage to national and international theatre as well. So thank you to the CCOs that do that work for us. We have the resolution there that the council receive the 6-month reports to December 2019 submitted by the Globe Theatre Trust Board, the Te Manawa Museums Trust Board, the Acacia Birch Trust Board, and the Regent Theatre Trust Board, and attachments 1 to 6 of the report entitled Cultural CCO 6-month reports to December 2019. I'll look to move those and ask for the Deputy Mayor to second.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will second those.
Thank you. And I just would like to open it up. I've made my comments, and again, my personal thanks to the CCOs. You will help in the recovery of our city. You will add vibrancy. You will certainly entertain people, and people will need to be entertained in the challenging times coming ahead. So I'll open it up for, are there any further comments? Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bowen here. Thank you for your comments. I think you've covered the important things really well. So all I wanted to add to that was simply, as Chair of Arts, Culture and Heritage, my thanks and our thanks to the board, the staff and the volunteers of council-controlled organisations. We're in a very difficult time, obviously, and yeah, we'll continue to have those conversations. But this reporting period has shown great progress, a real willingness by our CCOs to look at the issues that council has raised, to be creative in how they respond to those issues, to look at some different ways of doing things. And I think we should all be very proud, and I know we're very grateful for the work that they've done. Particularly, I want to draw attention to the Globe's success in external fundraising for their digital lights. They've successfully sought $85,000 towards that project, which is, you know, a not unsubstantial amount of money in terms of their operating costs. We always are grateful for the support that our volunteer community gives our CCOs. Friends of the Regent continues to contribute a huge amount to the vibrancy and viability of the Regent. And it's encouraging to also note the Globe kind of adopting that same model for their front of house volunteer staff. You know, Te Manawa has a robust volunteer programme as well. And it's been lovely to see Acacia Birch House open up 4 events on that front lawn. So we are in a difficult time at the moment, but I think our CCOs are well positioned to respond creatively and energetically to the challenges that we face. And I look forward to seeing that as we come out the other side of COVID-19. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson, you wish to comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Johnson here. I just really wanted to give a word of encouragement, I suppose, to the CCOs, because I think COVID-19 aside, when you look at this 6-month report, it's actually very promising. And, you know, some of the targets have actually been exceeded already, like the Globe performance numbers and so on. So I I can sense that it must be very disappointing for the CCOs to then have to go into a very difficult period of 6 months. But nevertheless, I think the good work that's been done in the first 6 months shouldn't go uncommented on. And even though at the end of the year we'll have to take a full year view, it needs to be said now that the first 6 months has gone extremely well. And I think we should take encouragement from that. And I hope that the CCOs themselves feel that they have done a good job in the first 6 months of this financial year. And equally, although it may not show so well on paper, we'll be doing a better job for the second 6 months because they were in such a strong position to start with. So I just want people to feel encouraged that the good work of the first 6 months hasn't gone unnoticed, that I think the wash up for the year will be all the better because of that. And well done for what you've been able to achieve through a very, very difficult period of time where things have been turned upside down. So just a thanks from me.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Barrett here, very much in line with those earlier comments that it was a strong 6 months, and we do owe a real debt of gratitude to the CCOs, but particularly wanted to comment on being heartened that during this challenging time, where they have had to hibernate quite a lot of their external facing activity, that there's been good work going on to actually think about how they operate, to do some preparation for the future. So I think it's been a good opportunity really for what's usually been something that's been so busy and so active working in the business, as it were. They've never had the chance to work on the business as much as they'd like to, and just hearing that the CCOs are doing some good work thinking about the future and how they can do things more efficiently, and in some cases actually preparing to undertake some physical works on the venues to actually get them up to date while they don't have audiences in there and have those opportunities. So wanted very much to encourage the CCOs and thank them for their efforts, especially at this time.
Thank you, councillors. Look, again, I think it just shows how much we do acknowledge and appreciate what our cultural organisations do. Really strong 6 months, and as the councillors have alluded to, you are well placed to assist the city in our social recovery, definitely. So thank you very much again. So councillors, we have the resolution there. We'll get that back up. Thank you. And moved by myself, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'm sensing a united view here, so I will put the resolution to the floor, and all those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Right, we staying with CCOs is the deadline number 6, which is around the deadline and preparation, and that's on page, excuse me while I get back to my, it's on page 117, which is deadline for preparation of cultural CCO SOIs or statements of intent, and there's a paper there from Julie McDonald from Strategy and Planning. Julie, do you wish to speak to this or add anything to it?
No, I don't think so, Mr. Mayor. I think you've already done a good introduction on your previous comments about the need for changes to the statement of intent, and this is just really necessitated by the pandemic. So, yeah, happy to have any questions.
Okay, I'll just open it up for any questions. Yes, Councillor Johnson. You're right, Councillor.
Sorry, I clicked it twice. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Now, my question was just whether the deadlines had been discussed with the CCOs as being reasonable and achievable. you know, whether the extension is sufficient, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
Yes, my understanding is that they have been, but I might ask Becca actually to comment about that. We're actually caretaking at the moment for the community development section on this. So yeah, it's the crowdsourcing answers at this stage. So Becca, I'm not sure if you want to comment.
Sure. Te Marie. So unfortunately, the Local Government Act only gives us an option to extend for up to a month. That's the maximum we're allowed to extend. Whether or not it's sufficient is another question, but it's all we're allowed to do.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Dingwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at the deadlines, I think the first deadline being the 1st of June for us to approve it, and then the second one, 31st of July for it to come back, I think is the way I understand it. Will that have an impact on when they actually receive the money? And will that be an issue with the CCOs? Like, is there going to be that month there of not having income from us?
You go, Becca.
Sure. No, they'll continue to receive their funding under the 10-year plan with or without the statement of intent being approved.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had come back out of the queue because Councillor Johnson, or Becca's answer to the question answered my question, which was about.
I wasn't following the chat quick enough. I saw you've just sent a reply. Sorry.
No, thank you, Becca, for clarifying that the Local Government Act only allows us to extend by a month. I would probably say that's not actually enough. If we were going to pick times, we wouldn't pick that, but that's what the local government allows us. So thank you.
Okay, that's exhausted questions. Thank you to the officers for joining us online. We now have the recommendations, which I'd like to bring up, please. And there are two recommendations. And the first one that pursuant to Clause 4, Schedule 8 of the Local Government Act 2002, that the deadline for shareholder comments on the draft SOI, Statement of Intents of the Globe Theatre, Tamanua Museums Trust, Acacia Birch Trust Board and Regent Theatre be extended by 1 month to the 1st of June 2020. And that pursuant to Clause 4, Section 8 of the Local Government Act 2002, that the deadline for delivery of the final statements of intent for the Globe Theatre Trust Board, Tamanua Museums Trust, Acacia Birch Trust Board and Regent Theatre be extended by 1 month, 31st of July 2020. Look, I'm happy to move those, and I'll ask the Deputy Mayor if he would second those.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll second those.
Thank you. I will now just open it up for any comments, and there is a comment from Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rachel Bowen here. Yeah, absolutely. As I just said, I don't think a month is probably long enough. And like you, I've been in touch with the CCOs through this period, and actually just had a conversation yesterday with a member of one of those boards about this very issue. There's a bit of concern out there about trying to put together a statement of intent when the world is so very uncertain at the moment. And I think in that context, I would reflect a comment you made earlier, Mr. Mayor, that we're looking to our CCOs to be agile in recovery. And almost at this stage, I think what we could usefully be looking for might be almost two tracks of statement of intent: a business as usual statement of intent, which draws on the good work that's been reported today and looks forward to a world where that can continue, and also a recovery statement of intent that sets out what are the implications if this continues, how might this impact the work of our CCOs over the medium to longer term. I think we'd all be very prepared to be flexible in our response to the CCOs as we're asking them to be flexible in setting their plans for going forward. And I know we're all happy to work with them to review as we go through the next 12 months. So look forward to seeing what can come back, noting that this is a very challenging time to be doing this future looking work when there is so much uncertainty, and our thoughts and sympathies are definitely with the CCO boards, as we find ourselves in a very similar position with our own annual budget. So we understand absolutely how difficult this is to engage in the kind of crystal ball gazing that's being required by the Local Government Act timeframes. But thank you for their willingness to do this work for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And look, no more comments. If there are no more comments, I'll just make one final one. Look, I totally agree, and I think we've already signalled that as councillors, we are up for the flexibility, and we have to be. And I would ask the staff to be as well. It's really important that these organisations recover, and they're doing that under their own steam. The forward-looking work of the SOI may need to be parked. In fact, almost will certainly need to be parked in some cases. And I just think that people just need to be a little bit flexible about this. We don't want to create any more angst than there already is with our volunteer trust boards and our hard-working staff who probably have had some sleepless nights understanding what the future may look like, as I have. But look, I can just say that you've certainly got my support, and I'd say almost the majority of councillors and staff to keep doing what you're doing, to survive as well as you can, and we will regroup around this SOI once we know when our audiences are back. We know what the new norm will be, and we can push on ahead. The fact that you are in such a good position is testament to your well-managed and well-governed boards, and that will absolutely keep you in good stead over the next 6 months to 12 months. So, councillors, we've got the resolutions there. If I can get those just back up again. Thank you, Natalia. I won't read them again, but I will ask if there's no more comments that we look to pass these. I'll take it as being all together. So all those in favour? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? None against, so that's passed unanimously. Thank you. Right. We now move to number 7 on our order paper, which is the approval of the local governance statement for 2019 to 2022. There's a memo there. This is very much a process-driven piece of work. A memo there from our governance manager, Hannah White. It's on page 121 of our papers. And I'll ask Hannah, do you want to speak to this?
I'll just have a very few short comments, please.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. I just wanted to point out that we had every intention of bringing this paper to you in March, but I'm sure you'll understand with the circumstances that were beyond anyone's control and our resourcing constraints at that time, we had to divert our energies elsewhere. So I am asking you to approve it retrospectively. There should be no new or surprising material in here. This document is something that gets collated every triennium, and it's a collation of materials of policies of what council does. It's collated for the purpose of the public, and so we have looked at it with that end user in mind, and so any revision rather than of content has really been about formatting, making it readable, and also adding some links if someone's viewing it digitally, so that it'll link them to other pages in our website for further information. You'll note in the recommendations that I am asking that you delegate to the CE the authority to make any amendments as we go on, so we can continue it as a live document over the triennium rather than have to bring it back to you. And to that end, I have noted a typo on the top of page 7 of the policy statement, paragraph 2, where it mentions when we changed from the ward system. And there's a typo there, it says 2018, it should read 2013. So I just wanted to note that to you. Also, at the bottom of page 6, the page prior to that, I note that the policy statement reads as per the regulations within the Local Electoral Act. rather than a resolution of PNCC. So I do need to also make a change to that. What I'm referring to there is in March 2017, the council resolved that we would be using STV for the 2019 elections. The Electoral Act actually allows us to have done that for 2 elections, but the resolution was only for the 1. So that will mean that we'll need to make a resolution again this year for 2022. So I'll bring that back to the council in a further report.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking at the chat box, so just give me a second. I'll go to Councillor Bowen. You have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Councillor Bowen here. Thank you, Hannah. Accepting that this is process driven, but I had a question about the representation arrangements that was triggered by reading this report. It references a number of councillors, and elected members will be aware that this was a question that was raised by the REM authority in setting wages for this term of council, that they felt like we had too many councillors. And noting just in your report that it says the council is required to review representation arrangements at least once every 6 years. And I'm focusing there on that at least once. Obviously, we have done it already. That was our discussion before the last election. But I'm wondering if we're able to bring forward a review of our representation arrangements that would enable us to look at the number of elected members before the next election. Is that possible?
Sure, that's a great question. So the short answer is yes, you are able to. It is specified in the Act that it is at least, as you point out, every 6 years. I think the reason for that is just the amount of process that needs to be gone through to reach an adequate review. There are 2 steps that must occur prior to a representation review. So one is making a resolution on what electoral system you'll use. The second is a determination about what will be done about Māori representation. And that has been made for us by the binding poll, which will hold us through the next election. We can't change anything in that space. So as long as we did the electoral review first, there would be nothing stopping council from bringing that piece of work into this triennium rather than wait to the following. If we did that, the first time that we would announce anything publicly, what the legislation sets out would be 1st of March 21. In order to have it in place for that coming election.
Okay. So if we were looking to advance that piece of work, Hannah, what would we need to do to make that happen? Would I need to bring forward a resolution today, or can that just be added to a work stream? What's the process here?
I think we've got a variety of options of how we could bring that forward. Remember, a representation review doesn't just look at the number of councillors, it also looks at whether we go back to a ward system, whether we'd be introducing community boards. So it is a wider question. It's quite a large piece of work, but there are several methods that we could go forward. As I say, the first step, which we have to do regardless, would be the electoral review, and I'm happy to bring that to the May council meeting, and that could be our first step.
Thank you. So I don't need to put forward a recommendation at this point to trigger that work, and on that basis, that's
no, I don't think there's any rush at this stage.
Great. Thank you for that. Thanks, Hannah. That's all from me, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Rutherford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Hannah. Appreciate this is not supposed to be have any surprises in it. It was really good to see the scope of the roles of the ELT because I hadn't seen that before. And it was really useful to know, so appreciate that. My question is around the list of local legislation. So specifically on page 130, we've got the speed limits bylaw 2013, which was due for review in 2018. And obviously that's a piece of work that we are working on at the moment. But in terms of this document being user-friendly, how are people in the community going to understand that process, or that we haven't just let that well, we did let that lapse for a couple of years, but how that we are doing something about that. Is there an opportunity to provide a note under that point, or how can we address that so that people reading that understand what's happening?
Sure, I can, through you, Mr. Mayor, I can comment on that. Maybe Julie McDonald might like to comment after my own. On the page prior, there is a very short paragraph that explains that if a review doesn't happen, that it lapses the following 2 years. So the reader would have to have read the entire section in context. Yeah, I do appreciate what you're indicating there.
Is it possible then just to I note that that's
add a footnote?
Yeah, that's the footnotes on the previous page. I guess I just want this to be as user-friendly as possible, and we can't rely on people going and possibly reading things to the detail. Is that?
I'm sure we can do something.
Okay. And no, my other questions are not relevant because those are all due for renewal in May. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett, please, a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Barrett here, just very much following in that vein of keeping it user-friendly, and noting that the purpose of, or one of the purposes of the document is to help people understand how local government works and how they can engage with it. 2 questions really. The first is also in that bylaw space, in that I think a relatively new reader to the document might assume that when they see that a bylaw won't be reviewed until, say, 2026, means that they may interpret that to mean that they have to sit for 6 years before anything might happen. And I just wondered if there was scope to also clarify that there are other mechanisms to trigger bylaw reviews other than simply waiting for the calendar to happen.
Do you want me to comment on that, Hannah?
Oh, thank you, Julie. Yeah, great.
Yeah. Sorry, I've just been sitting here wondering who the readers of this document are, but setting that aside, I think that it probably, when the governance team put this together, it would be useful to have a general statement at the beginning about bylaws process, and because, as you know, there are lots of rules around how they can and can't be reviewed, but also there's some flexibility in, you know, the language that's used. For example, a bylaw expires, but it doesn't suddenly disappear off the face of the earth. So I think having some explanation of what happens in real life is probably more useful than just having the kind of mechanistic date stuff, because it does look a little bit as though nothing happens in the interim, and then we suddenly review it as though we haven't thought about it for 5 years. So yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Thank you. The second question was around the portfolio aspects, and the only space that I saw portfolio really mentioned was in columns next to councillors' names, but it didn't really. There wasn't really any context there for the reader in the community around what a portfolio is, how it works. Does that have to be your first point of engagement? Is there options around how you engage? And wondered if there was scope when this is finalized to add a little bit of context there around the portfolio system and how it sort of manifests in the city council context.
I think I think there is scope to do that, councillor. It's not the portfolio system in some ways is particular to PNCC's context, whereas the requirements of the local government statement list what needs to be listed. So we've covered everything legislatively that we need to have covered, but I don't see any reason why we can't flesh out some of our particular context as well.
Great, thanks. That's it for me for questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, councillors. Again, I suppose back to you, Hannah, is just understanding how we capture some of those minor amendments, and if that could be undertaken by yourself and through the CE, and perhaps just recirculated to us as well, so we know they've been done. Right, councillors, we'll look to the recommendations. And if I could ask Natalia to bring those up, thank you. Right, so we've got 3 recommendations, and they are that the memo titled Approval of the Local Governance Statement 2019 to 2022 be received, that the Local Governance Statement of 2019 to 2022 Appendix 1 be approved, and that the delegated authority be given to the Chief Executive to amend the Local Governance Statement 2019 to 2022 to keep it up to date. I'll look to move that, and I'll ask the Deputy Mayor if he will second it.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So, are there any comments before we... Right, there being no comments, we will look to move this again. On taking it, it'll probably be a fairly... Oh, there is one. We have a comment. Sorry, there is comments. Sorry, I missed those. They're a bit late coming in. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Johnson, I just wanted to, I guess, back up what Councillor Bowen was talking about in terms of us being able to review the number of elected members, because I think that was a strong message that came through from the Remuneration Authority. And I certainly would prefer if we were able to do that before the next election. So just a comment in support of that suggestion. Thank you.
And finally, from Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Barrett here. Just wanted to speak to the, I guess, the overall approach to the governance statement. And while I do recognize that it's meeting a legislative requirement and that's its perhaps prime purpose, would just hope that when we are crafting these in future, we think about how it might read to somebody that's new to the city, perhaps even new to the country, or perhaps just newly interested in local government, and try to, I guess, reduce the number of loose ends that sit within the document and make sure that it's as self-contained as possible. And I think, you know, the questions that came were indicative of some areas where there might be loose ends. And I just think in future, if we can really make sure that things are as self-contained as possible, it'd be really helpful for these sort of documents.
Great. Thank you, councillors. Good comments. All right, we'll get the resolutions back up. I'm not going to read them again. We have the 3 of them there on the screen, moved by myself and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. So I'll take this all together, all 3 together and as one. So all those in favour? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against? Okay, that is passed unanimously. Thank you. Right, we move now through to number 8 on our agenda, and it is our work schedule for the coming months, May. We have 2 items there, one around Finance and Audit Committee independent appointee, and I can happily say that we should have a recommendation to you after in the next couple of days. Appointment panel has met, and same with the JC's Trust travelling membership appointments there. That panel has met as well. So those 2 are well in chain for the May meeting. I'll look to, if we can get that up. If we can get that up, that resolution up, please. And the council received its work schedule dated April 2020. I'll move that. I'll ask the Deputy Mayor if he would second it.
Yes, seconded.
And any questions or comments? And there is one. Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just the question relates to that. I know that the Infrastructure and Community Development Committee meetings have been cancelled for the beginning of May, and I'm just wondering what the work that was originally intended for those committees, where that work will sit in the meantime.
Look, we'll look to push those, anything that's urgent, to either council, but we're just regrouping on all of that. Look, if we come out of level 3 into level 2, then obviously things will recommence quite quickly. And that earlier resolution today gave us the ability for that to happen. Extraordinary meetings can happen. So look, it's really in the hands of the levels. And if we are still, for some unforeseen reason, we're still in level 3 in another month's time, then we'll regroup and pull them together. But I can't really, I wouldn't like to push them onto council yet, because we may be able to have an extraordinary infrastructure meeting quite quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, back to the resolutions. Resolution. Resolved that the council receive its work schedule dated April 2020, moved by myself, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Again, I'll look to do that vote all together. And all those in favour? Aye.
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 Against? Okay, that's passed unanimously. Thank you. All right. Well, that brings to the end. There's no further business. We don't have to exclude the public. So I just want to thank everybody for their attendance in this different sort of meeting, and to acknowledge our governance staff for pulling things together, and also to members that attended from the public, and also our CCOs for presenting and answering questions to us today. It does leave me in good heart that our cultural organisations are weathering the storm relatively well, but it will be, no doubt, a challenging 6 months ahead. So thank you all. We will recommence. You can go and have a cup of tea now, and we will recommence at 1 p.m. For our workshops. You've got a separate link for that. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.